YouTube subscriber, and then you can find out all about the shows and live as well. Okay, so tonight we are thrilled with Solo Arts Heal, and I want to introduce the host, Gail Schickley. She's a wonderful producer and interviewer, and she's was produced me in New York, and all of us and many of us at the Apap conference each year. So let's give a great big welcome to Gail.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Stephanie. And thank you for your vision of presenting Solo Arts Heal on MarshStream. It's a vision born from artists inspiring true stories about overcoming adversity, surviving mental and physical challenges, and becoming advocates for the respective health-related issues. Many of the artists showcase with me at APAP, including Stephanie in her solo show, Planet Do Re Mi, which Marsh audiences will see in the coming months. Held in January in New York City, the APAP Conference is the world's largest networking forum and marketplace for performing arts professionals. And it was there we talked about first how to effectively outreach to audiences with these creative healing performances, shows that would be helpful to any community offering education and advocacy along with the joy of live performance. But it was Stephanie who's made it happen, and we're so grateful for this, to have this opportunity of sharing these many award-winning stories with all the wisdom they offer and the talkbacks with audiences, all especially relevant at this time of COVID and a global pandemic. Tonight, we revisit a theme backed by popular demand, a theme to which we can all relate or will one day relate, the theme of caregiving. We're all of us caregivers in life, one day will be. Caregiving is providing for the physical and emotional needs of a family member or friend at home. And caregiving for people who are mentally or physically ill or disabled requires special skills, mentally, physically, people that are mentally or physically ill. You need skills dealing with financial and legal issues, medical needs, and of course, most important of all, it requires daily loving care. So tonight we're going to see a new take on the award-winning play, The Actual Dance, with excerpts performed by Chuk Obasi. Discussion afterward will include conversation with playwright Sam Simon, an ordained interfaith minister whose work and ministry is focused on the work of family caregiving, the Reverend Gregory Johnson. To tell the story of The Actual Dance, Chuk Obasi presents excerpts from the show. It's a real life story of a man finding the strength as his wife's care partner to face an anticipated sad ending to her cancer. It's as much a love story as a medical story, and with a happy ending. Obasi is an actor and director, a dancer and choreographer, and a writer and poet with over 12 years of professional experience nationally and internationally. He's currently a company member with the Private Theater, an actor with Tia Creative, a movement director at the Stella Adler Studio of Acting, an adjunct professor of musical theater at Drew University, and choreographer for Star Theater, that's Star Serving Teens Through Arts and Research at the Directors Company. He has many, many credits to his name, which you can see on the Marsh website and also on the Actual Dance site. But now I would like you to join me in welcoming Chuk Obasi in an excerpt from The Actual Dance.
There's a dance that one day each and every one of us will dance. The dance takes place in a grand ballroom with a fabulous orchestra. Now, the orchestra, I think, actually plays whatever song it is that the dancers themselves want to hear. Now, the dancers are you and the person you love. And you're surrounded by friends and family. All the people you've ever met, ever known, ever loved, all here for you. I've been to a lot of these events. Now, you can go to one of these events as a guest of one of the dancers, or you might just end up in the gallery watching as someone you know or love is dancing, but you don't get to dance yourself, though, until it's your turn to dance or it's the turn of the person you love. When it's my turn to dance, I wanna dance with the person that I love the most in this world. And if it's her turn first, then I want to be her partner. And I want us to dance a waltz. A slow, flowing, elegant, beautiful waltz. Now, this dance is no small production, mind you, in this ballroom. Oh no, this is no ordinary ballroom. It has a very high ceiling, a long, highly polished, beautiful blonde wood dance floor and brilliant spotlights. There's a platform off to the side that's large enough to hold a good-sized orchestra of 40 or 50 or maybe even more musicians. Now, the most amazing part about this whole thing actually is the orchestra. Now, an orchestra doesn't exist until they might be needed. And as an orchestra is needed, somehow the musicians, they just know. They just show up in the ballroom with instrument in hand, ready to perform. A violin, a bass, cello, flute, even a piccolo player and another clarinet and a large harp, everything. On and on until all of the musicians are seated. And then the actual dance begins. Susan Merrill Coffey. That's her maiden name. You know, I remember the first time I ever noticed Susan. We actually hadn't met yet, but we belonged to the same church youth group. Okay, she was from Houston, and I was from El Paso. Now, when we were 16, we traveled with our respective youth groups to the same regional convention in Texarkana, Texas. And I remember seeing this girl with long black hair and these big braces in her mouth. And I kept noticing her in a 16-year-old boy kind of way. You know, even though I stared at her a lot, I actually never worked up the courage to say something to her before the convention was over. But now, as it was ending and I was going home, I remember sitting on the bus and I'm seeing her standing there waving, and I'm asking myself, I'm like, is she waving at me? She later told me that she was. You know, I also remember our first date, and that too was just kind of a first date. It was 3 years later, and we were going to the Greyhound dog races across the border in Juarez, Mexico. Now, amazingly, Susan ended up moving to El Paso to attend college at Texas Western, and me, I was still living in El Paso, also attending Texas Western. But anyway, so when this date started, Susan, she was sitting in the front seat with her date, Steve, and I was sitting in the back seat with my date, Jane. And neither of our dates were going very well. So on the way back to El Paso, Jane was in the front with Steve, and Susan was in the back with me. And that's how it became our first date. Woo! You know, it didn't take much longer after that before we fell in love. You know, even though I wondered if two 19-year-olds really knew what love meant. Right away, we decided we wanted to get married. And now immediately, both sets of parents strongly objected. I mean, we were obviously too young and we were still in school. Hey, wait a while. Meet other people. I mean, if it's meant to be, you guys will get back together. All across the vast expanse of Texas, from Houston to El Paso, both sets of parents had the exact same reaction. Well, we got married that following August. And so here I am, 22 years later, and it's the first time I experienced this orchestra forming, and I have to admit, it scares and confuses me. It gets started with Susan, you know, updating me about her annual checkup. Oh, everything's fine, Sam. I mean, she says that to me, but then almost like an afterthought, you know, like a classic Columbo moment, if you will. Oh, just one more thing, Sam. The doctor thinks I should see a surgeon to check out something funny she felt in my breast. I mean, she doesn't think it's anything to worry about. She just thought it felt funny. Now, I'm surprised, but I'm not really worried. I mean, after all, this is going to be Susan's 4th breast biopsy. Don't worry. You know, I'm trying to reassure her. Hey, remember, you had a mammogram 4 months ago and everything was fine. Hey, let me see if I feel anything. Hey, you know, because humor and sex fixes everything, right? The doctor's words, they're strange. A new vocabulary that I don't immediately understand, but the import is clear to me. Stage 3. Wait. Why stage 3? Oh, because of the size of the tissue with the cancer and because there are no margins. Wait. Margins? What are margins? Oh, well, you know, with Susan, there was no tumor, so we just ended up taking out tissue. A margin would have been where the cancer ended and the normal healthy breast tissue began. In what we took out of Susan, there was no normal healthy breast tissue. See, now I know the journey I'm on. But I've been down this road before. This isn't my first time. One grandfather, 2 grandmothers, 4 aunts, 2 uncles, my father, Susan's father, my sister, Susan's mother, my mother. You see, I know the outcome. I know how this is going to end. The first time I cried is later that afternoon when we get on the phone with our pastor. I'm on the phone and I can't even speak. I can't even bring the words up. I have to hand the phone over to Susan, who very calmly and matter-of-factly tells him about her diagnosis and that she's going into surgery. The minister asks if it's okay to put Susan's name on the prayer list, and we say, yeah. You see, it's the tradition at our church for the minister to read out loud at Sunday services the names of people in the congregation who are ill. The congregation then chants a prayer asking for the healing of the body and soul of those who are in need of such healing. Well, as it turns out, Susan's body and my soul are in need of healing. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. That Sunday, we sit in sanctuary in the same seats we sat in for the last 15 years, listening to other people's names being read. I'm holding hands with Susan as her name is said out loud for the first time, and we chant together with the congregation. Lord, hear our prayer. Lord, hear our prayer. Lord, hear my prayer. Names are they're added to the list in the order which they're received, with the most recent names being read last, and so Susan's name is read last. And Susan Simon. Be not afraid. I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest. We squeeze our hands tighter, and my eyes, they fill with tears, and Susan is stoic. The surgical waiting area of Inova Fairfax Hospital is right inside the entrance of the hospital. Now, I enter this waiting area from the opposite side, having been downstairs with Susan in pre-op bay until it was time to roll her out to surgery. We say goodbye to her breasts in no particularly ritualistic fashion. Susan isn't even sad to see them go. I wonder what she'll look like without them. I mean, not that I care that they'll be gone. At least I don't think I care. I mean, I sometimes wonder if it'll make her less, physically attractive. But I'm not obsessing over that. I'm not. I think about how that might be different if the prognosis were brighter. The doctor comes up and says Susan is in recovery and I can go down to see her. So I go down to begin what will be a very long 3-day and night vigil. I don't want to be here. I really don't want to be here. But I can't imagine being anywhere else. You see that the orchestra is practicing now. They're getting ready. I'm confused right now, and I'm scared by the sounds and the smells and the images. It's the sense of being somewhere else and here at the same time. The sounds, they're real, they're everywhere. It's hard to imagine that anybody can hear this. I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to somebody. So I go see the psychiatrist that I used to see every now and then for the last 10 years. It's been a while since I've been here. I sit down for what turns out to be our only conversation. Once again, I cry. I tell him about the ballroom and how real it is. I secretly feel like I'm losing my mind, and I wonder, I hope that he will give me something. I mean, he did that the last time I was going through a transition. You see, the medication, I think it'll take away these thoughts and erase the ballroom and maybe change my future by changing what's going on inside of my head. But instead, he calls it a metaphor. He says it's beautiful. You see, it never occurred to me that this dance could be seen as beautiful. I always feared it as tragic and devastating. His words, they have a profound effect on me. Beauty. Dignity. Instead of fearing this dance, I think I'm actually going to be able to get ready for this dance. You see, I understand now that the actual dance will be the ultimate consummation of our love.
Yay!
Come on, move up. You can move up.
Thank you so much, Chuck. Thank you for that. Can you hear me now? Excuse me, I lost a connection briefly, so I'm back. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much, Chuck, for that beautiful performance. Wow, as the Rev would say, I think we all need a deep breath after that. Speaking of the Rev, In a few moments, we'll be welcoming caregiving expert Reverend Gregory Johnson and the actual dance playwright Sam Simon. And with proof of the show's happy ending, his wife Susan, who survived her cancer and lived to have Sam tell the world about it.
Well, thank you very much, Gail. Thank you, Chuck. It was, I love Chuck's performances too. We do it differently.
Yes, it is very differently. And in fact, I wanted to ask Chuck, the actual dance was written by a man, if I may say, a few decades your senior, who's white and of a different religion. Could you talk about a little bit what attracted you to this show? What motivated you to do this work?
Yeah, well, when Sam approached me about it, I had seen him do it about 4 times. And I'd seen him do it about 4 times at that point, and I just felt that the story was really universal. You know, I just felt that anyone could be telling that story. And so when he came to me, I simply felt, yeah, I can do it. You know, it so happened that a very close friend of mine was suffering at the time from a type of cancer, and I spoke to him about it at the time too. And he also encouraged me to do it. I felt that it may somehow help me process that experience. That friend of mine who I ended up losing before he got a chance to see the show.
I'm sorry.
I've been able to dedicate every performance to him since coming on board, which was, I think, 4 years ago now?
Yep.
That's so, and this is the actual dance playwright Samuel Simon, and you describe your work with the actual dance as his 4th age. He comes to it after your career as a prominent member of America's consumer movement, didn't you? You were trained as a lawyer and started your career as one of the original members of Ralph Nader's first legal advocacy group, but you've been long active in community theater, and you returned to the theater as an avocation in the 1990s, and now with a show that's been touring 7 years with performances worldwide. Tell us tell us a bit about how you came to write this show, Sam.
Well, thank you very much, Gail. And I also just want to give a shout out to this emerging collective of solo arts that heal. And some believe that's how I found how this show found me. The journey with Susan in 2000 to 2001, I had to get ready to lose her. And I did that, and I said I had to. It's what I expected. We had the history. My mother died from breast cancer. Susan's mother died from breast cancer just about the age that Susan was at when she was diagnosed. And finding the strength and the energy to go through what I thought I couldn't possibly do. And it's actually through my work in improv that I started discovering parts of the play, parts of the story, and with the encouragement of some really great people and my dramaturg, who is Gabrielle Meisels, I was able to put something together. What encouraged me is the reaction of audiences. And the more I performed it, the more the audiences seemed to react and brought me out. So I like to say that the show discovered me. And every time I perform it, and every time I see Chuck perform it, I learn something from a play that I wrote. Because it's really about, it's a love story. I'm holding my wife's hand when I say this. I learned different ways in which we do love each other. I'm married 54 years now. I was in the 45th year that I thought it might end. And it's really, first of all, we discover new ways we are in relationship with each other. And it's also been it's helped me discover what love really means, new ideas about what it means to be in love, and the idea that there is a spiritual connection between people that can be found, that, and the line is in, not quite in the play, it's in the poem of the play I wrote. And it's that breath of that Susan and I basically become one, that that you can be so close to someone that your spirits intertwine. And that I've discovered that through the work. And just lastly, I would say, and Greg can talk about this because he's one of the people who's been moved by the play. I'm just so struck by how people react to the show. I'm honored and humbled by it. But it would motivate Chuck. And the idea for Chuck to become a performer, as different as he is from me and age and things, was really Susan's idea. That this story is so intimate. That part of it is that it's important for people to be able to witness the story and project their own life story. And that's whether it's race or faith or age. So that and I think in theater, the audience wants to not have to wonder what it would be like for them, but to be able to see their own life presence in that story. And I think that Chuck brings that to, we both bring it to audiences, that Chuck brings it to a different audience and a different age and different, when I do it, I chant something called the Misha Barak, which is a Jewish song for healing. He chants several songs. So that's sort of the story and that's the background. And we're really honored to be able to be part of this new effort to bring this work to the work being solo arts to
Solo arts, yes. I'm so glad that you're here. And I've seen you so many years at APAP and you're really known, and I've always heard great things about your show. Only recently had the opportunity to see it myself. And how did you approach Chuck, or did he approach you originally to perform this?
Well, we were in an office together. I was doing some work at a nonprofit associated with the Collegiate Church, and Chuck, who is by it's a vocation or occupation training, an actor, and was doing work around art and social advocacy. And it was really, again, Susan who saw in him not just the actor part, but the idea of him doing the show. And he was very responsive, as he explained. He was at that time going through his own journey with a good friend.
Yes.
So stories about my wife. And Greg will tell a story about his husband, but Chuck went through the story with a friend he cared about, he loved. And the story is true regardless. It's about a relationship of love. When you're with somebody as a friend or as a partner, as a child, a parent, an aunt.
Crosses all the barriers, that we all have suffered loss, and it's something that is, it doesn't matter what race or religion or anything that you are, we all as humans are going through these immense difficulties sometimes in our lives, and caregiving is the utmost important thing for us to do for our loved ones. Let's bring in Greg Johnson into the conversation. Reverend Johnson is president and chief executive officer of Greg Johnson Partnerships International, a parent entity for International Center for Caregivers and Carers. He's the chief advisor for family caregiving to the CEO of Emblem Health. And as an ordained interfaith minister, Greg also has served at the Marble Collegiate church in New York City and has been honored by many city, state, and national international organizations. He was elected fellow at New York Academy of Medicine for his work and contributions in the field of family caregiving, but he also is and has been a family caregiver. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much. And congratulations, Chuck. It was marvelous to see you once again. It's so special. And I kept hearing as you were all visiting together, it's pieces of you and pieces of me that put us all back together. And I love the fact that this is Solo Arts Heal. And it's so, so true, because that's really what drew me. I knew Sam through the collegiate churches, and we had lunch together, and he told me about this play. And then I went to a reading of it. And what touched me so deeply, and I've had the privilege of doing talkbacks now for maybe 60, 70 of these performances in various places, and I've loved every one of them because the audiences have been just incredible and have been drawn into it. But what drew me into it was the fact that blessedly Sam and Susan have not danced the actual dance. I have, like many other members of the audience. And so I was able to share that because in 2004, our son died in Bali at the age of 40. And then in 2011, my husband of 41 years died in my arms. And with each of them, I had the privilege of, as it were, dancing the actual dance, holding, as I would say, holding their hand until I put it into the hand of the divine. And that was a great blessing. But I loved the image of the dance and having the strength to do it. Because so often with caregivers, they are overwhelmed. So often we often call them the silent patients, but so often new depths are there and are found in the caregiving journey. And that's probably one of the most exciting. And by the way, call me Greg.
Greg. Yes, Greg. And were you already involved in caregiving for quite a while when you suffered these losses in your life?
I had yes, with Joe and with Putra, I had been asked by Emblem. It's a very unusual blessing in my life to be this minister who has been for 20 years sitting in the middle of one of the leading health and wellness corporations here in New York City, bringing attention to the silent patients, the family caregivers. And I will forever be grateful to Emblem. But yes, I had been involved with it. And of course, with Putra, he lived in Bali, he was Hindu, so we had a whole number of varied parts to do with the family caregiving, in cross-cultural, in religious things, and it was quick because his illness came upon and it was about a 3-month period until he died. But there was a great deal that needed to be done. In Joe's case, he was getting older. He was 19 years older than I. And we were aware that it was coming soon. But as we always say, we've never had enough time with them, but I wouldn't give up 1 second I had.
You talk about, Sam, you talk about care partner and caregiver. Could you tell us a little bit about the difference in what you mean by that?
Yes, there are two stories here. There is a part of caregiving that is medical in character. In the show, there's the scene in the hospital where I hold out that semicircular metal pan when needed, and when I help her to get up to go to the bathroom with the IV stands. That's a part of caregiving. But I think for me that the real story was my heart was breaking. And what I knew how to, I could be strong there and I could do those things. But I didn't know how I was going to do what I thought I would have to do. And I thought I was going to have to hold my wife's hand as she took a last breath. And I did not know. I couldn't imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
And
That fear of loss, that anticipation of death, and and ultimately the perspective you talk about of the gift of dignity and beauty involved in facing the unimaginable in our lives.
And that to me is the role of the love partner. That is an independent journey. And there is the journey of a little bit more. So that's a spiritual part of the journey. So I think Greg would agree. It's spiritual and it's physical. I mean, it's also making sure you take breaks for yourself. It's finding ways to make sure you can afford what's happening, knowing what resources, being able to talk.
Did you have resources available to you that you sought out? Was it difficult to find? Was it easy for you to find? How did that work in terms of you having support as a caregiver?
You know, one of the talkbacks, we had a psychiatrist from the Sloan Kettering do the talkback, and you know, I blushed a little bit when she said, "Well, I did everything right. I went to our synagogue and got help from the clergy. I you know, reached out for friends. So I was intuitively doing. I went to a doctor. I went to, you know, the aha moment, by the way, wasn't from a rabbi, in my case. It was from through a psychiatrist. In fact, I didn't give up, but at least I was seeking it out. The hardest part for me, though, I would say, and I think it may be for many people, was I was convinced she was going to die from the get-go. Like the very first bit. I couldn't show that to her.
You wanted to be strong for her. And so you needed support for yourself and not having to turn to her in terms of what all your worries were.
And it's so hard, I think, often to be able to do for people. And it was a discovery that there is a gift inherent in the journey. That is, the aha moment was that not only could I do it, and that was going to be a bit of an ecstatic moment, but it was also a gift to her. And to be able to be
Wonderful.
that person. And that took a while to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I know, as I've told you before from my own experience, I lost my husband to cancer, and he was ill for 4 years, and we had a little one at the time. Our son had just been born, in fact, when he was diagnosed, and so kind of grew up with him, with his father being sick. And it was a sad and thing, but it was also very beautiful. We became so close and shared as one so much of our lives and over those years together. And Chuck, how about you? How did you did you find this healing? You said, did you find help in caregiving when you were with your friend? What was his name?
Bobby.
Bobby.
Yeah, his name was Bobby. Yeah, this was helpful. I mean, it it made me channel. It allowed me to channel a lot of what I was feeling through somebody else's words, and and just the encouragement that I got from him at the time when I was rehearsing for this. That in itself really filled me. I was definitely a little nervous. This was my first one-person show I'd ever done, and so felt like a huge challenge to memorize like 25 pages of somebody else's words and all that stuff. But there were a lot of spiritual things at play that kind of really made it an easier process than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Art heals. It's very cathartic, isn't it? Yeah. I wanted to ask Greg. So often I think it's probably not a secret that most caregivers in the world are women. We are caregiving from the time our first child's born, or for elderly parents, or in any number of things in the world. And this was something unique about this show is here we have two male performers, Sam and Chuck, and Greg, you as a man, as a male caregiver, how talk about the challenges in reaching men and encouraging them to share their stories that could be helpful. Greg,
Well,
can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure. Actually, you're absolutely right. It has been women who really were the role models for caregiving as mothers, as grandmothers, and all of that sort of thing. It was really the AIDS crisis that brought to life the men in the world of family caregiving, because it was predominantly the male world that was attacked by the AIDS epidemic. And it was during that time that men began to tell their stories. Caregiving began slowly to come into theater. It began to come in, and we began to see other roles. So it's been women and continues to be. It went into the gay world. And then, very interestingly, two other areas that we've worked on, because one of the things I talk about often are the many faces of family caregiving. And these two are ones that we don't think of quickly, but it was the veterans, the military. It was men helping men in a very quote unquote macho way, shall we say, it's okay to be sensitive and to have feelings. And the other area has been the prison systems. And that one is very shocking, but men are incarcerated together and they are living out their lives. And many of them are in life sentences and they begin caring for one another. And slowly that has gotten more attention. So suddenly we began to see all the faces of family caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
And they can
right now in light of COVID.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our roles has been with Emblem since this began. It was to bring about awareness. I mean, the 3 steps were awareness, acceptance, and action. That's been the role model or the plan for everything that we've done. To name it, to know its many faces, and to help us all find our place in that world of family caregiving.
Absolutely. I want to point out to the audience that in the chat, there are resources that you may enjoy and follow up if you are looking for some information about caregiving.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so grateful to you for putting that there because, none of us went to school to learn to be a family caregiver. We woke up one morning and the person next to us had had a stroke or something. An event happened in life, a pandemic occurred, and suddenly we're a caregiver. And that's the piece of the healthcare system that has had the least attention. The healthcare is like a 3-legged stool. Somebody's sick, that's the care recipient. All the professionals, the home attendants, all of the people who are paid, as it were. And then that third leg, the family caregiver, whether it's family of origin or family of choice. And family of choice was definitely a gift from the LGBT community in the AIDS crisis. That's where that word became, and now it's used all over the world. And it's not an LGBT word. It's something that all of us are part of. We have a faith community. We have a political community. We have a social community. I have a caregiving committee in this 20-story apartment house. So there are many families of choice as well as family of origin.
Absolutely.
Questions that the audience might be invited to ask, Gail?
Yes, we have asked, are there any questions from the audience? I noticed that Nancy Argo said that the 11-year dance with her daughter has been given clarity and depth through the intimate performance that you've offered, Chuck, tonight, and Sam and Susan Simon. A thanks from Nancy. I'm sorry about the dance with your daughter. If there are any other questions, we'd be happy to try to answer those. Just put those up on the chat for us.
And on that issue, I want to clarify a little bit. The dance is the process. It is, you dance it whether someone dies or not. It's in the anticipation of it, and there's significant there's a process called anticipatory grief.
Mhm.
There's even indications that it can be. You know, let me say this, I've not lost Susan, but we have lost people in our lives. And was lectured by the head of oncology, the psychiatric oncology at Sloan Kettering, not to say I don't know what it would be like. I didn't lose her. But the process of that fear is equally and can be equally deeply anxiety and grief producing. Early
You
on,
recently experienced a loss, I know, Sam.
anticipation loss. Though I did have early on in doing the show, I did it in Kingston, New York, for a audience in which the woman, after the show, in tears, said to me very clearly, said, "Sam, you have to understand that the dance, this ritual, doesn't end when the person dies." She had lost her husband 9 months ago. She says, "I'm still dancing." So the dance is a metaphor for the ritual of reconciliation, of coming to terms with. And this is, I know you and I think recently had a discussion, Gail, it's what is a word? How do we describe that process? I'm not a big fan of the word heal. There's a Hebrew word called shalem, a Hebrew word shalem, or wholeness. And we use the analogy of Jacob waking up the morning after his famous wrestling, and he wrestled with something. It could be a grief or a loss, and he wakes up with a new name, a new mission in life, and actually a broken hip, a different physicality.
These experiences really change us, and they make us stronger generally. I love the metaphor of the actual dance. It's a beautiful one. We do have a question from our audience and asking, as a friend, how can one best support someone who is a caregiver? Perhaps that might be something for you, Greg.
Yes, absolutely. One of the most important things is never forget how important just presence is. I always say, what is a caregiver? It's someone who shows up. That's the easy part, and stays to help. And I always invite people to, or urge people to ask, what can I do to help you? Because people will know, and I often say this to caregivers, be ready with specific things when people say, let me know if I can help you. It becomes sort of like a polite way as they're going out the door. But people, if you can say, on Tuesday, could you do this? Or I need some medicine. Having specific things makes a very important step. And in the section on the information, there's a book entitled, I call it the Bible of Caregiving. It's called Share the Care, written by Sheila Warnock. And it's filled with that sort of information.
And this is free information people can get by going online to the link.
Yes, you go on to the link and it's all there.
I remember, as you know, when my husband was sick, people would ask me specifically, and it's hard sometimes to ask for help. You're so busy doing everything that if could I go shopping for you? Can I pick some things up at the grocery store? You know, as you said, those specific things are so helpful. And we also have a question here from our live YouTube feed for Chuck. Has there been any performances that you've done of the actual dance that have stood out for you, Chuck?
Yeah. I mean, they've all they've all stood out, each and every one of them in their own way. I mean, the very first one that I had ever done, that one was really special. And I mean, it was just special because it was my first time. I've had different performances where, you know, there's always one or two comments from the audience that would sit with me. When I did it, I think it was last summer in Washington, D.C., that one felt really special. and it was really
Where was that?
It was in Washington, D.C. Sam, what was the name of that theater in D.C.?
Yeah, well, it was part of the DC Black Theater Festival in Anacostia and
Terrific.
Anacostia Theater.
Yeah, and it was special because the more I've done this piece, the more I've been inclined to move about the stage, and so you know, I've had 3 different directors. I mean, I've had my first director, Kate. She was with me for about a year or 2, and then Gabrielle, who was the dramaturg who Sam mentioned, she was kind of an interim director. And at that point, we everyone involved felt that a version should have more dance in it. I'm a physical actor.
Yes, you're a choreographer and dancer. So and a singer, I hear.
There, and you know, and we have you know, we have 2 live musicians in the live stage version and everything. And so, you know, we felt like, you know what, let's get an actual choreographer to direct it now. And so the DC performance was one of my first performances as it was reimagined as even more of a dance piece. And you know, I felt that like I'd really sunken into it at that point, you know, and the movement just kind of like was it kind of lifted me, and I felt like it lifted the audience in a whole new way. And so it just made me really happy that we went in that direction to really explore movement. And so, you know, and it also makes me feel like this piece, even now, you know, 4 years in, you know, still continues to evolve, and I still get to find new things in it, in the
Well,
word.
thank you. It really speaks to us, and I want to thank you so much for sharing that performance. Quite a different setting than having an actual stage in a theater where people can. But I know we all got some real feeling and enjoyed your performance very much. And Sam and Susan, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for writing this beautiful play. And Susan, I'm so glad that you are well. We didn't really get to hear from you this time as much, but it's wonderful just to have you be part of the conversation. And Gregory, as ever, very happy that you could be here. I want to remind everybody of these wonderful resources that we have that you can access on the chat, free resources to help you in caregiving if ever you have situations. There's a lot of caregiving out there in the world, and as Greg said, often we're called the silent patient. So there's help for those caregivers out there. Please.
You are not alone.
You are not alone. Thank you so much. And I want to announce that it is time for us to come to a close. I do want to announce next week, we're going to have Valerie David, who will present excerpts from her critically internationally acclaimed comedic solo show, The Pink Hulk. And it chronicles her extraordinary journey to become a 3-time cancer survivor. And most importantly, most recently conquering stage 4 metastatic breast cancer diagnosis, and now battling breast cancer after fighting off lymphoma. Valerie does something most people facing cancer in their life probably would never think of doing. With the fear she might lose the girls, she takes them out for one last hurrah. Does she succeed? Is there a happy ending? The award-winning show follows Valerie's path to find her superhero within and fight back to become a cancer survivor. It's an empowering true story with plenty of laughs guaranteed. She's going to be joined by special guests, her director, Maris Heller, and patient navigator Jenny Saldana, New York Presbyterian Hospital and Columbia University Medical Center. And Jenny is also a breast cancer survivor and a stand-up comedian. So as they say, laughter is the best medicine. Look for upcoming Solo Arts Heal shows on MarshStream, announcements at themarsh.org. And thank you to the Marsh staff, Brian and Brianna, and everyone for your help. And thank you all for joining us tonight. See you next week.